Al, it is our final regular episode of the year,
Oh, snap.
and it's time for us to finish out by talking about the latest entry in the Resident Evil series.
I sure do love this series.
You had seen this game before.
Yep, my brother played
Had
it
not
multiple times in front of me.
You had not played it though, so you have played it for the first time. I watched you play it, and
Mm-hmm.
then I played it,
Mm-hmm.
and
We
now
played
here
it
we
in different
are.
perspectives.
We did, yes.
Which is important to note.
We're gonna talk about this here video game. It is sure a video game.
Yes.
Yes,
we
indeed.
recently talked about 7.
Correct, a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So now we get to talk about how it compares.
Correctamundo.
Please don't headbutt me in the throat. Sorry.
That's not me. I'm not headbutting you in the throat. So just to be clear. That'd be a very weird introduction to a podcast. Just be going up to you and just go, bam, right in the throat.
Now talk.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Season Anime Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I am Jared, joined as always by Doc Al and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode number 311 because Amber is indeed the color of your energy, and this is going to be a beautiful disaster.
Oh, man. Old school. Who remembers?
Who remembers? We're talking about Resident Evil Village today.
Also known as Resident Evil
Village.
8.
Yes. But they don't call it Resident Evil 8 for reasons, I guess. I don't know.
I'm just saying it's also known as that.
No, yeah, you're right. But yes, this came out last year on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, the PCs, the Google Stadias on May the 7th, 2021. It also came to the Mac and Nintendo Switch on October 28th, 2022.
Wow.
And yes, like as you said, this is a sequel to Resident Evil 7. Ethan's back, and he's got some more bad things happening to him, essentially.
We have, like, Brick Wall Chris back.
Yeah!
Which is a huge improvement over 7.
Very much so.
Oh, boy, am I glad to see him back. He's a breath of fresh air. I like that there's also just no explanation. Like, yeah, this is Chris. This is what Chris has always been like. What are you talking about? Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. Let's talk about development of this game before we dive into everything else.
Okay.
Resident Evil Village was in development for approximately 3.5 years before its announcement in June 2020. 2020. Capcom asked the Resident Evil team to start development on August 8, 2016, while Resident Evil 7 was still about a half a year from release, according to director Morimasa Sato. Without having RE7's release to judge its success, the team kept the initial designs around the core survival horror gameplay roots that had been in Resident Evil 4 and had been a return to form in RE7. During this early period, they came up with the concept of the village as a central theme, inspired by RE4, where its village was also a central location, as well as many of the gameplay mechanics established by the title. The team used RE4's approach to create a balance of combat exploration and puzzle solving.
Hey, remember how you said that this was basically a remake of RE4?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Sato said
that for the new game, we're bringing the essence of Resident Evil 4 while Resident Evil 7 functions as the base for the game. Looking back at the use of horror of RE7, producer Tsuyoshi Kanda said, "One of the lessons we took away is that it isn't something that is black and white. It's always going to have some variation or modification, and figuring out, okay, this worked for RE7, but rather than replicating it, let's find a variation that works for a wider audience." The development team opted for a more balanced take on action and horror for Village, which was a good idea.
it was a very good idea.
RE7 was released in January 2017 and was well received by critics and players, so the team decided to make the next game a direct sequel to RE7, keeping its protagonist Ethan Winters as the main character and retaining the same style of gameplay. According to Kanda, this also helped to complete Ethan's story that was left open in RE7. The team had been attached to this character and worked to devise a story with him with the other Resident Evil teams within Capcom.
Not sure why they got attached to him, because he had no personality in 7.
Yeah, but they at least fixed that in this game.
They did. That's what I'm saying, is they were attached to him from 7, and like, why?
Yeah.
He got better
He was just
in 8.
a dude.
He was just a guy.
As they continued to develop the village, Sato said they wanted to give players more freedom towards solving puzzles and make it a horror movie that you can play. Kanda said that like RE4, they were able to incorporate a variety of different themes of horror within the village, leading Capcom to describe the village as a theme park of horror. Sure. In contrast to past Resident Evil games that generally have been linear progressions, the team created a more open-world style village with optional and secret areas designed to reward the player for exploration. The main story remained in a preset order that the team felt best for how the player should experience it. He said that compared to the claustrophobic feeling of the Baker Mansion of RE7, the horror in the game came from uncertainty on what lurks in the openness of the village, while easing the tension curve compared to the previous games through quiet moments such as save points. Sato also stated that the village's snowy weather was inspired by the team's trip to Europe for research for the game, where they were met by an unseasonable cold snap. The scenery was covered in snow. This inspired us to implement snowscapes into our game. We use snow not just for visual presentation, but as gameplay elements as well.
They do?
Sure, I guess.
Okay.
While it is recognized by Capcom as the 8th main game in the series, and as its logo is stylized to include the Roman numeral 8 for 8, the producer stylized the title to emphasize on the village aspect rather than the 8. In a Famitsu interview, producers Kanda and Peter Fabiano said that they considered the village a character and wanted to reflect that in the stylization of the title so that players would remember it. Development on the game was hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic in Japan, at one point bringing the development process to a halt for a month.
Wow.
Like RE7, Village was developed with the RE engine. According to director Tomonori Takano, the development team drew inspiration from Resident Evil 4 as they wanted memorable characters to populate the village. Takano said that the developers wanted to combine the same approach that started with Resident Evil 7, and that they wanted to move away from simply using elements like zombies to scare players, but create unique situations and characters that would create fear in new ways. Capcom had considered populating the game's castle and village with hundreds of witches, but found this difficult to conceptualize. The team decided to switch directions from witches to vampires for Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters, albeit avoiding stereotypical tropes of vampires in popular culture. Castle Dimitrescu was also inspired by Pele's Castle in Romania. And there's also a quote here from Morimasa Sato from Resident Evil Village, meet Lady Dimitrescu's 3 daughters. It says, you'll find that many of the enemies that appear in Resident Evil Village are inspired by many figures you might find in classic or gothic horror. However, in order to make them make sense in Resident Evil universe, it was imperative that the daughters be living beings. No matter how supernatural something may appear, they always have some kind of scientific explanation as to why things are happening. This approach just isn't specific to Resident Evil Village, but the franchise as a whole, and was something we were sure to address. When we were constructing the narrative and the full scope of the game, it was an aspect that we were very conscious of.
I just clicked on the link for this castle, and it does not look like that castle at all.
Well, it's inspired by.
Maybe the inside? I don't know.
We took inspiration from this, but we didn't make a 1-to-1 replica.
Yeah, it does.
The other 3 houses in the village drew from other classic gothic horror themes of simulacra, mermen, and ghosts for Heisenberg, Moro, and Benevento, respectively. Carl Heisenberg is characterized as an engineer with an extravagant dress sense inspired by men's fashion from the 1960s. His base of operations is not covered by snow, unlike the other lords, likely due to its lower altitude of its location. Salvatore Moreau was conceived as the most repulsive creature on Earth. His domain was originally inspired by a frozen lake the team sighted during a research trip in Eastern Europe. House Benevento furthered some of the ideas that the team had used in Resident Evil 7, with Sato noting that the fully veiled Donna Benevento and her puppet Angie are considered to be the scariest of the 4 lords by his American colleagues, even though the team approached Angie's design with an instant impact in mind rather than purely frightening.
I agree that they were the scariest of the 4.
For major antagonist Mother Miranda, Takano stated that the crows were the primary motif of design, noting them being symbolic in the game's village as well as functioning as the overarching design theme for the game. The Lycan's werewolf-like design was developed with the game's gothic horror setting in mind, with Sato explaining they very much spawned from the fact that we wanted to create an enemy that represented the village. We designed it very much with where this is kind of a twisted outcome of a human being, where we draw a lot of inspiration from werewolves, being able to tap into that gothic horror visual. Chris Redfield, a prominent protagonist in several Resident Evil entries since the first game, appears as a major supporting character in Village. However, he is instead shown as more nefarious in the game's trailers due to killing Mia and kidnapping Rosemary, which surprised long-term fans. Kanda described Chris's appearance in the game as a much darker, more sinister role, in contrast to his previous heroic portrayal in the series. Early on.
Yeah, okay.
Chris's actions serve as a major mystery to the game, which Capcom felt was an opportunity to showcase the character's progression to fans who were already familiar with him. Chris eventually becomes playable towards the end of Village, where the game briefly transitions from survival horror gameplay into a more action-heavy segment due to Chris's veteran experience in fighting bioweapons, which Andy Kelly of PC Gamer saw as a cathartic moment for players who have been carefully conserving ammunition up until that point. And then they also put RE-verse in this game, but blah, blah, blah. Who cares?
Yep.
Is there anything in release and promotion we want to talk about? They put out demos like they did with 7, so that's just a thing, yeah.
People are obsessed with Lady D.
They sure were.
Yep.
They put out the DLC of this game, which they announced at E3 2021, and then at the Capcom Showcase of this year, June 2022, the Winter's expansion, which included the new story expansion Shadows of Rose, where you played as Ethan's daughter Rose. There's a third-person camera mode in that DLC, and also for the main story as well, along with some other stuff for Mercenaries mode as well. And that came out on October 28th, 2022 for the original consoles it came out for, and then came out on December 2nd for the Switch Cloud version, and will come out on the Mac at a later date.
You didn't mention the puppet shows, but those were amazing.
There were puppet shows?
Yeah, so some of the ads for this game were like puppet shows with the 4 lords, and they were really, really wild.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
This game
Ellie,
received...
You need to know that.
Yes, I thank you. I agree. This game received favorable reviews. On the PC, it's an 83 out of 100, PS4, 81 out of 100, PS5, 84 out of 100, and Xbox Series X, 83 out of 100 on the Metacritic. There were some people who did not like the Chris segment of the game, where it says here, it was criticized for being too action-heavy, negatively comparing him to Call of Duty and the worst action-heavy portions of Resident Evil 6, which, hey, what is it like being wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how it feels to be so wrong.
Let's see here. All right, Alice, time for you to guess how many units has this game sold. So this is up to June 2022, so does not include like the Switch and Mac versions or any like new copies that got sold in conjunction with the DLC that came out later that year. So as of June 2022, how many units had Resident Evil 8 sold?
I mean, I could just cheat and look, but
That's mean.
it is mean. I think maybe we're gonna go with, what's a normal amount? 2.5?
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, why the not?
Incorrect.
Dang it!
6.4.
Wow.
It had sold more. It had shipped more than 2.5 million units in the first 4 days of its release.
Wowza.
So yes, it became the 3rd fastest selling title in the RE series, tied with the Resident Evil 2 remake. And with this game, Capcom had now sold a total of 100 million units of the series since 1996. So there you go. RE8. Resident Evil 8. The 8th Resident Evil. Already, I could just tell you, much better game than RE7.
Much better game.
Much better game. It's just more fun to play. The story's more enjoyable. Just, they improved the gameplay on a bunch of different facets. Like, it's just everything you would have wanted from RE7, they took and were just like, and just made it better for this game. Al sent me some pictures of these puppets, and they look very dumb and good.
Aren't they great? Look at that.
Oh, I think I remember seeing this. Like one of these commercials in the lead up to the launch. Now that I see it, yeah, it looks a lot familiar.
Yeah,
a lot familiar. Yeah, that's the word.
They were wild. But yes, this was a huge improvement. Holy
Big time
moly.
improvement.
And we've talked about this several times, both on and off the podcast, but I think part of what made it so much better is that it went back to more like what Resident Evil has been. Like, it's somewhat goofy at times, but Like it's not completely serious, it's not completely scary. It's kind of in between somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ethan continues to lose so many things off of his body.
Yes.
Poor Ethan is just constantly missing pieces of himself.
And he's more of a character in this game, like I think we mentioned
Yes.
earlier. Like he has more snark to him. He's more reactionary to things. He's not just like I'm just a dude here. He's actually like I have character now. Isn't this great?
Right. It was awesome. I mean, like he actually seemed like he gave a
Mm-hmm.
and maybe part of that was his motivation to get his kiddo back, and some rage at his supposedly dead wife. Um, but he actually just seemed to be a human as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just somebody you're playing as.
As a person to embody the player.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Like we mentioned earlier as well, very much they pulled a lot of stuff from Resident Evil 4 for this game. Like there's a merchant that follows you around all the time. Enemies drop money and stuff for you to, use to buy upgrades for your guns and just items in general and all that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of jewels around that you can shoot and use to sell to, buy more things and all that sort of stuff. Like so much of this game just has the DNA of original RE4 that you would look at this and just go, yeah, they just made a spiritual successor to RE4. But then on the flip side as well, they're making that RE4 remake.
Right, right. And I mean, we were talking about this while we were playing it, that like if RE7 was like Resident Evil 1 remade,
Mm-hmm.
like this is definitely RE4 remade, but how is it going to feel to people who played this game and
And
then
then
they
go
go
and play that
to
remake, yeah.
right, like how is that going to feel, because there are a lot of the same like vibes to it,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the same plot points ish. There's no giant statue chasing you down, but
Unfortunate.
you do have a man who turns into a tank, so there is that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see just how people react to this remake compared to this game in particular, just to see if like people aren't as enthusiastic about the RE4 remake because they just played Village, 2
Right,
years ago, or if they'll just be like, yo, it's RE4, who cares?
right, which seems to be somewhat the case. Um,
Yeah.
Although I legit showed you earlier today, there were people complaining about like the chainsaw parry with a knife in RE4 and how unrealistic it is. And
It's like,
there were
bruh, look at the series you're talking about. Come
right,
on.
right, and that's what everybody was saying is like, have you played any Resident Evils? And this one person was like, oh, it jumped the shark with 5 and 6 and Code Veronica because it really went crazy, and
Code
it
Veronica's a very weird pull for that.
right, and like it got away from the roots, and then somebody responded back that the most recent game being Village in in the series had a giant vampire lady and a man who turns into a tank. So kind of proving the point here that Resident Evil is not a fully serious game and has always leaned pretty hard into that B movie type of
Mm-hmm.
genre. It always
100%.
has.
100%.
And I love it. I'm glad that they went back more to that with
Yeah.
Village than
I
Seven.
agree completely.
I was like, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. And then they put it in third person and I could actually play it. It was fantastic.
Which so I guess to clarify as well, like you played this in third person all the
Mhm.
way through. I played this in first person all the way through because like I just been used to it from playing through 7 and everything, and I didn't buy the DLC, so it was just that's the way I had to play it.
Right.
It looked like it would have been harder to play this game in third person than it was in first person, but I think it's also just a factor of they designed this game specifically for a first person viewpoint,
Right.
originally and everything.
Right.
But with the RE engine and all of that, like they are able to do things like make third person games like they did with 2 and 3, and they did a little bit of that in the 3 remake, where like the beginning of the game is you're in first person and then it is third person to the rest of the game. So like it's totally doable, and I think like for what they do, like it runs completely well. It plays, about the same.
Mm-hmm.
It just, there's parts of it I think like the viewpoint kind of hinders you because you don't have your complete viewpoint in front of you. You're kind of hindered because the character's in front of you because of the third person behind the back camera profile and all that sort of stuff. So like there's a bit of things like that I think that slightly hinder it. Like if someone came to me and was like, hey, which viewpoint should you play this game in, I would be like, hey, you should play it in first person. That's the way to go.
Unless you're like my best friend who can't play it in
yeah,
first
exactly.
person.
Unless like you have to play it in third person, like do it like that. But I would say like it's not like bad or anything. I just think like there are some caveats to playing it in third person that you would have to deal with.
Fishing is harder in third person.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that, like, trying to get those like animals and everything. It's much harder to do in third person. And I think some of like the precision aiming as well is kind of a little bit more difficult in third person compared to first person, at least from what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it also might just because I'm bad at aiming.
Well, that's also prior to you having to turn auto aim off of it because it was being incredibly stupid.
I did much better after we turned off auto aim, didn't I?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It was wild how much better I did. But one of the great benefits of third person perspective is that we get things like me being completely blocked by the dump truck.
That was pretty funny.
Lady D is like, you are not getting past my butt. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not getting past your butt now.
But like, it is really cool that they were able to like make this work all the way through.
Yeah.
Because you don't really see a lot of games like have a specific camera angle for the entire game and then be like, hey, by the way, we're going to make a secondary camera angle that works completely well. Like, I feel like this worked and like GTA 5 did it incredibly well as well. And like those are like some of like the biggest examples I could think of like games that started off in one camera angle and made another one and it was totally playable and fine and worked incredibly well. As well.
I don't know if you heard that or not.
No, I did not hear that.
Okay, we're good.
But yeah, it's cool that they were able to do that.
I was very pleased because I'm not able to play first person games very well. Like it just does not click with me. I think the only one that I've really been okay playing was like Doom 2016.
Yeah.
But just something about the perspective is just not something I can do. So once they announced like, hey, we have a third person mode, I was like, I can finally play this.
Yay.
And my brother did me a super duper solid. By last Christmas, I went home and he's like, what if I just play RE8 in front of you so that you can experience Village and not have to play it? And I was like, yes. And then he played it like 4 times. It was great.
I will say, I think the biggest difference between the two camera angles comes in the Chris section, because I think in first person you can do crowd control way better than you could in third person.
That makes sense.
Because I was also just going and just headshotting so many dudes, and it was so satisfying.
Okay.
But like you're just able to like kind of just move between targets, I think, much easier than you were in third person when you were playing it.
But counterpoint here.
Yes, counterpoint. Hello.
In third person mode with Chris, if you have his knife out and you crouch, he does that weird crouch.
That is a good point. That is a good point.
Which I guess it should be mentioned that we didn't talk about that in RE7, but we made Toxic Gamer Ethan Winters
yes,
do all the teabagging in RE7, and I continued
the doing that as a joke. Because there's so few enemies in that game, so like anytime they show up, it's like pop, 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 teabag them and move on.
I continued the tradition.
Yes, and I very much appreciate it.
In Village, but with third person mode, and so I had a knife out with Chris, and I started doing that. Rob was like, "What? What is he doing? What is this?"
It was the wildest crouch ever.
My man was like a frog.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Toxic Gamer Ethan Winters continues to live. Well, sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
Oh man. But yeah, this game's fun.
This
That
game
was
is super
sorely
fun.
missing from the last game, except for the end of Zoe DLC.
Yes, yeah. I I thought that this was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Just generally it felt like more of a like return to form for Resident Evil.
Yeah, I agree.
We got original Chris Redfield look back, and we got original Chris Redfield personality back, and we also got, stupidness and fun
Hmm.
gameplay back.
Hmm.
So I am feeling more confident in the series now after playing 8 or
Yeah,
Village.
yeah. I
Because
would agree
holy
with that,
moly.
but also it's going to be interesting, I think, to see where they take the series next.
Yeah, because I mean, like Ethan's done.
Yeah.
Can't play as Ethan anymore. What are we gonna
So I
do
wonder what
now?
Chris Redfield and his rogueness
His sweet peacoat with no buttons.
with no buttons takes on the BSAA.
Man, I would play a game with his like Wolfpack boys and gal.
I would too.
Those
Like
dudes
that's the
look
thing I'm
awesome.
most. That's honestly the thing I was most interested in coming out of this game. Be like, I want to see Chris Redfield go completely ham on the BSA for being dummies, and his rogue unit now just messing everyone up for getting into bioweapons, and him being like, "This is what we've been fighting this whole time, you idiots! What are you doing?
I think that would actually be a really cool
Stupid!"
direction to go for this because like they showed us in the helicopter, like, hey, look, here's a BSAA guy, but he's a bioweapon.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, they've mentioned several times like he went rogue. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know what happened between 8 and Rose. But I mean, I feel like it would be a really cool way to take the story to find out, like, I don't know, what's Chris up to since he's gone rogue.
Yeah.
But I wonder how people would react to that.
Yeah, that's also true.
If they reacted poorly to it, they're wrong.
There's a lot of whiners in the Resident Evil fandom, so.
God, there's so many whiners in the Resident Evil fandom. There's so many.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've never played a Resident Evil game before. I swear to God.
Well, would you like to talk about the story of this game? Like, I mean, there's not a whole lot to really talk about the story because, like, a lot of this is, you're exploring big areas and everything, and then you have boss fights in those individual areas, and then things happen and progress. Like, there's some story beats, obviously, but it's not like this isn't a super duper super duper story heavy game. I would say, which is fine.
Yeah. We also can't forget to talk about jiggle physics.
Oh boy, will we ever. Um, But essentially, you start this game and like Ethan and me are settling down. They have a kid. They're trying to escape the terrors of Louisiana in Europe now. And then Chris Redfield and his homies just bust into their room or their house, shoot me, and kidnap the kid. And Ethan's like, "Yo, bro, what the heck? Why did you do this?
Why did you kill my wife and take my
That's not
baby?
nice." And then they get broken out of a transport truck, and now Ethan goes into this very spooky village that has a lot of bad things happening to it, and finds out his daughter's been split into flasks,
Yep.
and he's essentially got to defeat these four lords and the leader of them in order to get his daughter back, and that's basically your premise for Resident Evil 8.
Yep.
And find out what Chris is doing because he's a weirdo.
Like I said,
I
with his
mean,
peacoat with no buttons.
exactly.
I will
Uh,
say though, like besides like the weird tactical pants, like Chris is pretty dang stylish in this game. He's got that like sweet tactical turtleneck with like his he is struggling to stay in that shirt with
Barely
his
containing his muscles.
barely containing him. Like his arms, Jesus Christ, return to form. I love it.
It's very
Um,
good.
I also think it's funny. We haven't mentioned this at all, but like they really continued the bit of not being able to see Ethan's face,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really well done.
I think the best parts of that are when in the DLC.
And the Rose DLC,
Yeah,
yeah. But even in third person mode, if you like try and look at his face, he'll turn away from you. Pretty good.
it's real good.
But yeah, so you're in Europe. Chris was like, hey, you're gonna live in Europe now.
Yeah, get away from everything. And it turns out, oh boy, you didn't get away from
You
everything. You
definitely
just
didn't
got
get
to
away from
the
everything.
you got to the genesis of everything.
Um, I was appreciative that there were a lot more villain, that's not what enemy types in this game.
Yeah, so you have like
The
the
like
regular
standard
little
Lycans.
the normal dudes you run into who are kind of Lycan-ish. You will run into like some bigger wolf guys who are kind of more special enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The weirdos in like the basement of the castle and everything that like have weapons and all that sort of stuff. The flying
Mm-hmm.
dudes. The dudes you run into in Heisenberg's area that all
Yeah,
have like all those
the
variations to them.
soldats.
Yeah. So like there's definitely a lot more enemy variety in this compared to 7 where it was just like 2.
Yeah, yeah.
The
And
boss fights I think are better in this game as well.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, so I guess we should go somewhat in order-ish.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because Lady D was like a big thing that they used to Market Village.
Yes.
Everybody's like, hey, look, here's this really tall vampire booby lady.
Big Lady Summer.
And everybody's like, yes. Yes.
My favorite thing about that is that like all the reaction came out afterwards and Capcom was like, "Yo, we were not expecting this."
Yeah, they did not expect it. They
Hang on a second.
I was like, how did you not expect that? Have you been on the internet for a day? Come on. But yeah, they did not expect it. As I mentioned before, she is capable of blocking you with her giant dump truck butt.
Mhm.
She's got like fingernail claw things that she can
Mhm.
retract. Um, she's very, very tall.
Very tall and she stalks you around the castle at one point kind of like
Mr. X.
Mr. X and RE2.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to deal with that, which was very funny to watch you and I play this game because you watched me play a little bit of the castle portion
Yep.
where you were just very timid and like, I don't want to go out there. She's going to hit me. And I was just like, all right, hey, what's up? Let me juke you and I'm out of here. See you later.
Wild.
It's very funny.
I mean, that just kind of is like how we work, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're way more brave than I am when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, it's just very funny just because you're just watching me like, oh my gosh, you're just so more you were more brave. What are you doing? I'm just like, meow.
Hold on. Her character design was inspired by the 16th century Hungarian noblewoman Elizabeth Bathory, the Japanese urban legend internet ghost story of Hashaku-sama. I don't know what that is. And Angelica Houston's portrayal of the character Morticia Adams from the Addams Family.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Huh.
We had a lot of designs.
Some of the characterization offer references Ramon Salazar from RE4, a diminutive villain said to have resonated with many players as a memorable antagonist. So they went the opposite. They're like, what if we make a giant lady instead of very small man?
From one spectrum to the other.
Ooh, it's been falsely pronounced.
You're falsely pronounced.
No.
Got him.
Got him. Dimitrescu. Huh. Anyway, I will stop reading her Wikipedia page now. I just got curious. But yeah, it's very much like a stalker character section. You also have her daughters who attack you throughout.
They're made of bugs.
They're made of bugs. This is some of the part where Ethan gets pretty brutalized. He like gets hand hooked.
He has to rip his hand out of the hook.
Ugh.
He also gets his hand cut off.
Oh right, that happens too. His arm gets
and
cut
he just
off.
puts it back on. He's like, oh, okay, cool.
All right.
This works.
Well, gotta get this and flip that switch again. Woo, let's go.
Yep.
Yeah, man. And that was wild. So the castle section is like some of the like most notable from like the original advertising.
Yeah, because they basically kind of just like showed that off, and then not much else of anything else, which makes sense. You're usually
Yeah.
going to show off most of the beginning of the game and the advertisements to not give away too much of your hand.
Which I'm glad because the second one is my favorite, even though it's absolutely horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely horrifying.
So like the first section of the castle is kind of like your traditional Resident Evil, where you're going around solving puzzles, fighting enemies, all that sort of stuff. The second section is more of you're solving different kinds of puzzles, but there's really no enemies in there, and you're kind of just really trying to solve this like puzzle house, and then eventually you get another stalker character that you have to deal with, but is much bigger, and is like a one-hit kill if it catches you essentially,
Correct.
and it makes it a little bit more stressful, let's say. For some people, for me, I'll just like, all right, let me just juke around you. All right, see you later.
I don't know how you're not terrified by that thing.
Well, it helped that I had already seen it when I was watching you play it, so like I already knew about it. I knew what was coming, so it wasn't
That's
like,
true. That's true.
oh no. So like, there's a section in that where like the walkthrough we're using was like, hey, you can do this, which is like what you did, where it's like hide in these various places and just wait for it to go about its way, and then you can go out and go do your stuff. Or when it first comes at you, you go back into that like that the room with the mannequin in it, and
Mm-hmm.
there's the table, or like the table or whatever she's laying on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could just wait for the big baby to come in, and then you just wait for it to circle around the table, and you just run around and you're gone, and it doesn't catch up to you. You
Which,
go do your stuff.
to clarify, in case anyone is not aware, which I'm sure they are aware, the stalker character in this level is a giant monstrous baby
With a lot of jiggle,
with a lot of jiggle. And like it's dragging its umbilical cord and it's just leaving blood everywhere and it's just like
making a lot of slop noises, like,
oh, it's so wet. And it's like
and just
happy
crying all the
giggling.
time.
No, it's happy giggling at you and yelling like dada and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I think I mentioned to you, like I never wanted kids, and this makes me especially never want kids.
You're just gonna pop out a giant baby that's gonna chase you all over the hospital.
Oh God. And it's just like it's got the weird like baby hands and feet and like it's got the one eyeball open and it's I think part of what makes it so upsetting is the noises though.
Yeah.
And there was also the point where you were telling me like hide under the bed and you'll get to see a view of the undercarriage. I'm like, don't say undercarriage of this weird baby thing.
I mean, you did get to see a nice view of that undercarriage, that's for sure.
You're right, I did. You did. I also posted a nice picture on Twitter of the baby side-eyeing us
It's real funny.
with no context whatsoever.
Yep, none needed.
Yeah, that baby's got some jiggle physics.
Mm-hmm. And then like the boss fight for that section as well is definitely the most unique out of all of them. Where like you
Yeah.
have to go find the doll
Angie.
throughout the house, and essentially that's how you win that fight. Is you have to do it before the other dolls come and just try and murder you, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Like you see the dolls like getting more like jittery as you're looking around for Angie, and you like
Mhm.
stab her in the head with the scissors. Um, and then you like once you've quote unquote killed Angie, you realize like, oh, I forget the name of the gal, but like, oh, Donna. Um, you actually just murdered her, and she was kind of like a ghost this whole time, kind of ish.
Mm-hmm.
It was horrifying, very scary. That one is definitely my favorite of the four.
It's certainly the most unique out of all of them.
It is very unique.
Mhm.
I was dying for you to see the weird baby.
We sure got to see that weird baby.
Got to see that
100%.
weird baby. Like that elevator scene. It's like, whoa. Whoa. No, thank you.
It's very good. The third section, the Moreau section, is
Snot.
you go through a lot of snot, and then he just transforms into a giant sea monster, and he's just gotta maneuver around the waters while
I
not getting
scared
knocked
you
off.
at one point.
Yeah, because you okay. Playing games with Al is, especially scary games, she is very timid. She is very nervous. She is very take it easy, take it slow. Make sure the coast is 100% clear. Check 5 times before going, and then she'll
We gotta
do her
make sure
move.
we don't cross the road. Like we gotta be careful.
Instead, in this, there's one section where I was like, okay, do this stuff, and then you gotta wait, and then you're gonna go across, and then you'll be fine. And she's just like, "Eow," and I was like, what are you doing? You're gonna die. I mean, you were fine, but it was just like, who is this? Who is this person playing? Did Game Boy just take the controller from you inside the plate instead? This isn't you.
I was scared because I knew the bridges were going down, but also I get scared around water critters. I didn't want to get eaten by the water critter. So I just zoomed.
You super zoomed, and I was like, whoa.
You panicked. It was so
I did
funny.
panic.
I don't think I've ever heard you panic with me playing a game before.
I just didn't want you to die and have to redo that stuff. That's why I was just like, whoa, 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 whoa.
But I made it.
You did make it, surprisingly.
Surprisingly. And then
Very
you get
lucky.
to fight weird snot merman who's very sad about his mom not loving him.
And also, he's just like hanging out. He's got a little tiny human body hanging out the mouth.
Yep.
Just very funny.
Yeah, he's not okay.
Rain snot upon you all over.
He like has a sunken village there. Like part of the village is sunken there, which is also interesting.
But yeah, you beat him, and then you have 3 of the flasks.
Mm-hmm.
And then Heisenberg basically is like, "Hey, I'll give you the 4th one, but I want you to hear this, this opportunity I have for you." And he basically is just like, "Hey, what if we work together? We'll take out Miranda because I don't like her.
Mm-hmm.
She did all this stuff to my body, and I hate it. I want to take her down
a lot."
Yes, and he's like, "I want to use your daughter to defeat her." And Ethan's like, "No, that ain't happening."
That's my daughter. I don't know you.
And then Heisenberg's like, "Okay, well, I guess we'll have to fight then. Go through my my factory, my big factory."
Which is got a propeller man who cut off his own arms accidentally.
Yep. Factory, I think, is like probably the most confusing part of it, because like just getting around it is kind of not as easy as some of the other sections of the game.
It's very easy to get lost in the factory.
Yes, it's very easy to get lost in the factory.
And the map is very unclear.
Yeah, you got lost, I got lost. So
I'm sure the Duke got lost at some point.
It's bound to happen.
Yeah.
But you also learn you get some Chris info here.
Yeah, we get plot.
Chris runs into you. You run into him earlier in the game, I think in the Moreau section. And he's just like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing? Get out of here." And then Moreau attacks, so you don't get to really find anything information out. Here you find him down like at the bottom of it, and he's working on some weird contraption. And then eventually he's like, "All right, let me tell you what exactly is happening here.
Let me break it down for you, buddy."
So, you remember how I killed your wife? That wasn't your wife. That was Miranda disguised as your wife. That's why we were trying to murder her, because we don't like her and she's bad and we want to get rid of her. Okay, good. We were trying to save you and your daughter. Good. Things went very bad. Bad. Now we're trying to fix this.
Good?
Question mark? Anyways, you probably got to go fight Heisenberg, so you should go fight him in this cool motorcycle tank contraption. I'm going to go hang out with my boys and gal.
That thing was wild. It has like a chainsaw and a cannon and a motorcycle and a tank.
And a Gatling gun on it. It's all sorts of wild.
I do think it's great that throughout the game a few times you hear the Wolfpack boys that are like, "Chris, you should have let him know what was going on."
Mm-hmm.
And Chris is like, no, we couldn't let him in. We couldn't he's a civilian. We couldn't do that. And they're like, "Chris,
but you've been trading him."
Chris, why didn't you tell him? Like they're calling him out for his which is good. He needed that, because
if of all people who needs people to call him out, Chris Redfield needs people to call him out on his stupidity sometimes. And I'm glad he now has like a good squad of people who will do that.
I agree, because Chris is so like lost in the idea of like not bringing people in unnecessarily at this point, because he's lost so many folks that he made it worse in this situation because he wouldn't just tell people what was happening.
Yeah, very stubborn boy.
Very stubborn brick wall of a man.
There's also a part where like when they're down there talking, Ethan's like, I'm gonna go get Miranda after this. And Chris just like looks at him, smirks, and is like, okay.
Yep. Okay.
It's so good. Like snarky Chris Redfield, A+. But like we were saying earlier, like God, it's so nice that they made a return to form for Chris, just even by like character design and just his character as a whole. Like this is 100% Chris Redfield that you know and love.
Right. This is the characterization is there that you're like, okay, yes, I can see how RE6 Chris would become this Chris, whereas you could not see that connection with RE7 Chris.
No.
And like the whole blue umbrella stuff was nonsense. Like none of that made sense.
And they essentially just retconned that like through this game. There's like, yeah, that we're not doing that.
Yeah. They're like, ooh. I do think it's funny. There were several moments where they're like, oh, look at this weird symbol on the wall. What is this?
Yeah.
And then they explained later the umbrella connection.
Yes, I was talking to a friend and like they basically said like it felt like RE7 was kind of like a gamble and like they just kind of threw that out there and then it got real popular and they're like, oh crap, we got to fix some of this stuff that we put out here now with RE8.
Yep. And they did.
And they did, which is really great.
Yep. I was so glad to see this Chris back.
Yeah, 100%. The Heisenberg boss fight is real wild. Like he's like, because you have to use that tank motorcycle, and that's how you fight him. And he's just turned himself into a giant tank as well.
Yeah,
just covered in all sorts of metal and machinery and everything. It's so wild and a real fun time.
It's so stupid. I love it.
Yep. That's some prime Resident Evil stuff right there.
Yep. Sure is. And then you die.
Yeah, you defeat him, and then Miranda shows up and is like, I'm going to kill you. Okay, see you later. I'm taking your daughter for mine.
Woo!
And then Chris's group is like, hey, by the way, Ethan's dead. And Chris is like, Urgh.
Another one.
Not like DJ Khaled. Not another one. So he grabs his squad together and they just raid the village and just take out a bunch of dudes. And they're like, we're going to go take out Miranda. This is our time. We're doing this. We're finishing the job now.
Yep.
And that's where you get the big action sequence where you're Chris and you just mow everything down, and it's so satisfying.
There was one point where you were worried that I was going to run out of ammo because I was just blap, blap, blap and everything. Then you look down, you're like, oh, never mind.
I misread it because I thought you had like 100 or something. And I was like, oh, that's not good. You're going to run out soon. And it was like, oh, you have like 600. I had, going into that fight, the boss fight, there with the Chris section, I had like 1,000 bits of ammo left. I was like, I'm good.
Amazing.
So yeah, you basically you mow down a bunch of enemies and then you blow up this section of the village that's being protected by Miranda via calling in airstrikes. And
you get to fight the big boy, or a big boy. I don't know if it's the big boy.
Yeah, you fight a big boy down in a very tightly contested fighter area, which makes it a little bit more difficult than normal.
It is difficult, yeah.
But they also make mention in this that, like, oh, the BSAA's here, and, like, it's very clearly Chris and his group are not working with them, and they're like, I don't know about this. But then they find the Megamycete, or the Black God in the Japanese version.
Ooh, that's cool.
Which I think they call it that in the DLC, don't they?
I don't remember. Oh, they do in the section with the altar.
Yeah. So that's the thing. That's basically the genesis of the mold and everything from 7 and now here as well. So he's like, all right, I'm going to put a bomb in here and then we're going to blow this up and then we're getting out of here. But yeah, he finds Miranda's lab as well. And he finds like all this information about how like the dude who founded Umbrella like met her. And that's how he started making the T virus and all the other viruses and everything. It's because he met Miranda at one point.
That was Spencer.
Yes.
Spencer used stuff that he learned from Miranda to make the T virus, and also she's been alive for a century-ish, and wants to revive Ava.
Yeah, she wants to revive her daughter who died due to the Spanish flu.
Or Eva?
Like Eva, that's how they call it, I think.
Yeah.
And like the Lords, the Lycans, and then Evelyn from 7 are like experiments that she made to try and recreate her daughter that had failed. But she's like, oh, Rosemary's going to be the one who does this. And they're like, no.
No.
So Chris is just like thumbing through here. He finds a prison cell, just pokes his head in there, and he finds someone in there. He's like, "Show me your hands," and it's Mia. But he's like, he gets on the comms. And he's like, "Hey guys, where's Miranda at the moment?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, she's at the ceremony side. She hasn't done anything yet, so she's just chilling there." And he's like, "Oh, this is actual Mia."
She's alive.
She's alive, and they're like,
they
"Wait a
thought
minute,
that
huh?"
she was just gonna be done with her and kill her.
Yeah, so like she's like, "Hey, yeah, they caught me. That they did some experiments on me. That sucked. Anyways, where's my daughter? Where is my husband?" And Chris is like, "Yeah, about that. Ethan's kind of gone and dead, but we're gonna get Rose. I promise you, we're gonna get Rose." But then she's like, "Yeah, I don't think you understand how special Ethan is." And then like it cuts to Ethan like waking up, and he's just like, or he's in this dream sequence and talking to Evelyn, and Evelyn's like, "You're dead. You're made of mold. You died 3 years ago. You're not even supposed to be here." And he's like, "Huh?
Jack
That doesn't make
killed
sense.
you."
Anyways, I'm gonna wake up for reals now, and I gotta go fight Miranda."
I love that he had his heart ripped out and he was just like, "Oh
Yeah,
well,
whatever.
what a nap. Let's go."
The best part about this is that he wakes up and he's in the Duke's carriage, and he's like, "Duke?" And he's like, "Oh, hey, you're awake. It's been a while." Anyways, you look like you're doing
Duke.
okay.
Bro friend
like,
Duke.
"Take me to Miranda." He's like, "I'm already on the way, my guy."
Yep, I got you, buddy.
Shouts out to the Duke.
The Duke.
What a good dude.
He's a good dude. He just wants to help you make some food and
sell you some stuff.
Make some money.
Exactly. So then he takes you to Miranda. You save. You get all your goodies prepped up for the fight. You save and do all that sort of stuff, and you fight Miranda. And she's trying to revive her daughter, but then instead it just turns into Rose, and she's like, "No!" And then Ethan shows up. He's like, "Get the away from my family!
Not my daughter."
I don't know you. So you fight her, you beat her, and then you're all good. Chris comes in. He's like, "We're gonna get you guys out of here. We're getting you out of here." And like the Mega Messiah is coming from the ground and everything, but then Ethan's like, "No, I gotta finish this."
Well, you start to see
daughter.
Like his arm is starting to like disintegrate.
Yes, he's starting to like he's reached his limit of his powers.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Well, I'm done for, so I'm just gonna go sacrifice myself to make sure everyone gets to safety."
He like pushes Chris away, holding Rose, and takes the bomb. Is like, "Bye."
And Chris is like, "No, okay, I guess I'll honor your request. See you later."
Bye.
And then you hear he gets on the plane with Mia, and Mia's like, where's Ethan? Where's he at?
Kaboom!
And then, and then Chris is like, "He's gone!" and punches like the side of the helicopter, which I thought he was gonna punch Mia because it looked like that. And poor Chris is real bummed. And then they also show like the BSA are using bioweapons, and he's like, "Hey, we got to go to the BSA Europe headquarters," and that's all you hear about that for Chris's section. But that's the end of the story for Ethan as well. And then there's a post-credit scene of older Rose going to his grave, putting flowers on it and everything, and then she gets into a car with some agents of Chris's essentially, and they drive off, and there's a person there that they stop and talk to or something. I don't know. That never gets elaborated on, so we don't know.
Yeah, maybe that'll be in the next game or something. Who can say?
Who knows? But yeah, good times.
It was good. It was wild and stupid. I loved it.
So I didn't know the twist or anything at the end.
Okay.
I kind of figured there was something with Ethan, considering how many times we've seen him just like have limbs chopped off and everything, and he's like, "Bloop, I'm good."
Yep.
So like that 100% makes sense. I wasn't expecting him to die though at the end, so I thought that was surprising. So yeah, some interesting things at the end of there.
He a little dead.
He's a little dead.
I think
we talked about this when we were talking about RE7. I think they imply that the collectors that the one dude had been talking to in Louisiana,
right,
and like giving information, was the Four Lords and like Miranda and everything.
Oh, were they?
I think there's a file in this game that implies that.
That's possible.
I could be wrong, but like that's what I got out of it, and it would make sense considering like they are like the originator of it and everything. So if Miranda could find new ways to see like how is this mold doing in this different area, like what's the difference in this? How is it being affected? Is he just going to work for my experiments and all that sort of stuff?
Right. Oh
So
God, if you
yeah.
try and Google the collectors for Resident Evil, it's like, do you want the collector's edition? No, that's not what I want. No.
uh,
Oh God, I can't find any information on this without how would I search this?
let me see. Oh, that's not going to help either. It's going to put Resident Evil 7 The Collectors. It's going to be like Collector's Edition. Yeah, this is just, hey, do you want the Collector's Edition of this game?
Yeah, this is not working.
No,
They should have used a different group name.
they should have. But either way, that leads us into the DLC,
Which I played.
The Shadows of Rose, which essentially is a lead up to that post credit scene at the end of RE8.
Which was wild.
Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting way to do it. I thought this was okay. I didn't think it was like the best thing they've done. I thought there were some interesting elements to it.
Yeah.
But like, I think at the end of the day, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's no end of Zoe, that's for sure.
It is no end of Zoe, but I do think that the funny thing is that like she is in the goo,
Mm-hmm.
and she gets help from a glittery spirit person thing, and she's like, "What are you, a guardian angel? Who are you? Like Gabriel, Michael?" And he's like, "Michael."
Michael, yep, that's me. Hello.
We'll go with that one. And so you get like little notes and help throughout from Michael, and like it's very clear it's Ethan.
100%, yeah.
Like, you know, the whole time it's Ethan. And then like you get to see him do the like crazy action pose, throwing her like down in the house away from Evelyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I did think that the thing with Evelyn was interesting, that she was like taking it out on Rose, that
Yeah.
like she didn't get the family that she wanted because of Rose, essentially.
And again, I think that section of the DLC is probably the most interesting in terms of like how they did like the puzzles and everything with like, you know, the mannequins and like the dolls and all that sort of stuff. Like that was some real wild things that they did there. Like obviously there's some funny things with the mannequins where they would just stop and be like,
Huh?
Hey, how's it going? But like just having them chase you around and like you have to have line of sight on them or else they'll start moving at you and try to kill you. Like I think that was some real wild gameplay.
It was wild. It was actually scary too.
Yeah.
But it was funny because there were moments just like, hey, I'm a mannequin. What's happening?
There's one time where like it was coming down around a corner and peeked around like the door frame. It's just like, and I sent you the picture of Loki doing the same thing. It was very perfect.
It was basically the same picture, honestly.
Mm-hmm. It was very funny. But essentially Rose is in here because she wants to get rid of her powers because she's tired of being a freak. And she's like, oh, and she learns from K9, like, oh yeah, if you go in here, you'll get rid of your powers. It's fine. But it turns out that's not really him. It was a illusion from Miranda.
That if she takes the purifying crystal, then she's powerless, and then she can be
taken over.
Eva again.
Yep.
Woo! But yeah, turns out, wow, Michael is Ethan. What? Mm-hmm. And she's like, my dad? That's you?
My papa.
My dad?
Which I think is good, because like it gives her like a good, like, you know, have like an actual interaction with her dad that she never would have gotten. She
never would have gotten.
And like it gives a nice closure for Ethan as well in terms of his story.
And I mean, it kind of implies like he's been with her the whole time, which is kind of neat, that like he's been with her because of her powers, essentially. Mm-hmm. And he kind of like is encouraging her to leave and stay how she is, but when she's very, very determined to not do that, he's like, all right, well then I'm gonna help you. Like if that's what you want, that's what you want. So like that was cool on his part, that he was trying to do what he thought was best for her, but then like once he realized how determined she was and how upsetting it was for her to have these powers, he's like, all right, well then let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
But then you get some like really, really nice moments of them like being a family and blocking his face.
So good.
with his arm.
Just incredible framing throughout.
Incredible framing. And also just a nice touch that he's like in his hoodie since she has his coat.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. But as you mentioned after we finished it, like it makes the scene at his grave make so much more sense because you realize the context of like she starts this not knowing her dad at all. She knows nothing about him really. Mia doesn't talk about him. She doesn't know much about him. And like throughout this, she gets to know him a little bit better. And then they have like this really touching moment. Um, and so she's able to like feel more connected with him when she goes back to the grave, even though at one point we just didn't have sound. We had sound, we just didn't have
Dialogue
voices.
sound.
No dialogue sound. It was very weird.
That was very funny.
It's very weird, but it made everything make more sense. And like at one point, like the agent calls her like Evelyn, and she freaks out. Again, makes way more sense knowing like what happened in the DLC where she actually had to go against Evelyn and hear all these like awful things said to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ethan's a proud dad, and you know, I guess is still dead, but kind of with her still ish.
Yeah,
because she still has her powers.
It's a good amount of closure for both of them.
Yeah, I do want to know who that figure is, though. Who is that next to that
figure.
car?
Unknown figure.
Unknown.
Who could it be?
I don't know. We were trying to
ghost.
calculate like how old Chris was at this point, and he's like old.
He's an old man.
He's an old man.
Old man Chris.
I want to see old man Chris. Can you imagine?
Old man Chris and Leon. But yeah, that's Resident Evil Village in a nutshell.
It was fun. It was really fun. Good return to form.
I agree. Fun time all around. And that's going to do it for our podcast this week. So if you'd like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimecheckup.com or sac.cool, where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared Now Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. You can buy our books, One Shiny Moment, a critical analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and a whole wealth of bonus content as well. Next week, it's time to take a glimpse into the future.
Zura.
Of media in 2023.
Oh, man.
And hey, at least this time we will have watched the Game Awards before then, so we'll have like all that stuff ready to talk about.
Wow, that never happens.
I know we got lucky this time with having an episode at the very end of the year. So, thanks.
When are the Game Awards?
Thursday.
This Thursday?
This past Thursday, if you're listening to this.
Okay.
So yeah,
we'll have to remember to watch that, or I'll have to remember to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So we'll talk about all the new games coming out next year and new announcements or anything and all that sort of stuff next week.
Mm-hmm.